BookTube. I have a little bit of mail for you on a slightly overcast Saturday. It's humid. It's not cold. It's not windy. It's not gusty. It's not rainy, but it is overcast, and that's enough to make Frida a little bit down. Because there's the chance of rain, and she doesn't like even the chance of rain. But I imagine I can convince her to go on a walk later today. But in the meantime, I have a bunch of packages to show you, a bunch of mail. We'll start with a periodical. In this case, it's the New York Review of Books, another great English language book review. And this issue has ups and downs. The down for me was a piece by Michael Kazin that is allegedly a review of Longueval's first volume of his new biography of John F. Kennedy. But it isn't really that. He sets the piece up as though it were a review of that book, but then he spends the whole of the piece attacking John F. Kennedy for a poor legislative record, for no real accomplishments as president, for the fact that nothing's named after him after the fact and whatnot. Most of the observations that he makes in the course of this review are grotesquely inaccurate, or just blinkered. I mean, if you're saying, what were John F. Kennedy's main accomplishments, and you're talking about a partial test ban treaty, so you've come that close to an accomplishment that might have something to do with nuclear weapons, but you don't actually say anything more than just that, then you're dealing with a writer who has an axe to grind. I've seen this many times. Kennedy seems to be a favorite thing for certain writers to go after. Usually, if those writers have buried deep inside their psyche daddy issues. But one way or another, it was interesting to read, and the highlight of the issue was the same thing. It was the exact same kind of failure. Because the point I want to make about Kazin's piece on Longueval's book is that it's a poor review. Leaving aside Kazin's opinions about JFK, which I don't think are verifiable. I don't think they would stand up to scrutiny, and I'm wondering if anybody will scrutinize them. If anybody will write in a letter saying, this is pure historical revisionism. But leaving that aside, it was also a poor review of a book that is not inexpensive. That Longueval book, if you find it in your bookstore in the UK or in America, is pricey. If you're a person who's interested in JFK or his period and you're wondering whether or not this book is worth your time and money and attention, you're going to have to go elsewhere than this review to make any kind of call about that. Because even the few scattered comments that Kazin makes about the book, you will completely distrust because of all the frothing at the mouth stuff, the opinionizing that he does elsewhere in the review. I'm naturally sensitive towards that thing. A review can be it's a fine soapbox for opinionizing and politicizing and philosophizing and whatnot, but it's got to do its job too, and his doesn't. And the highlight of this issue also doesn't do its job as a review, and that is a long piece that Alan Hollinghurst, the great novelist Alan Hollinghurst, does about the new edition of the Diaries of Chips Cannon, that are edited by what's the guy's name? Simon Heffer. A big 1,000-page thing that I showed you. One of you actually sent me the UK copy. This thing does not have an American publisher. Hollinghurst is here reviewing the UK edition just because he felt like writing about Chips Cannon, and that's what he does in the course of the piece. He writes about Chips Cannon. And it's really engaging, really intelligent. But I know that he is not mistaken, but he's acting as though he were mistaken into thinking that he is reviewing the Diaries of Chips Cannon. He, of course, is not. He's reviewing an edition. He's reviewing Simon Heffer's edition of the Diaries of Chips Cannon. And he virtually doesn't in the course of this piece. So once again, I mean, in this case, if you're an American book buyer, you're not going to see this book in your bookstore. But let's say you see it online or whatnot, or let's say you get this thing shipped across the ocean and you read it in England, once again, you are not going to know whether or not that particular book is worth your time, money, and attention. So with review failures just in general for the highlight and the lowlight, although one of them annoyed me more than the other. But there was also the letters page. Because the letters page has something that furthers a discussion that we've been doing on this channel. We have talked on this channel a few times about writers responding to critics, writers responding publicly to a review of their work. Partially my discussion was prompted by some horrible behavior on the part of a writer, but also just in general. This question has gone back to the dawn of time. And my stricture has been, don't. Just don't do it. If you are a writer and you read a review of your work in a prominent venue and there are facts wrong, enlist somebody to correct those factual errors. Usually your publisher is a good bet. Just tell your publisher to have somebody say the reviewer misrepresented the facts of this book. And that's it. If the reviewer doesn't like your work, so they get all the facts right, but they don't like your work, you stay silent. Completely silent. Because you can only hurt yourself if you don't. You can only hurt yourself if you write in complaining about the fact that your review got a 3,000-word review in the London Review of Books and you don't happen to like paragraph 20. That can only make you look bad. And that will hurt you. In the long run, that will hurt you. Readers will remember that you struck them as an ungracious brat, and when they see your next book on the new release table, that's going to be one of their first visceral reactions, and you don't want it to be. But it occurred to me when I was looking at this issue of the New York Review of Books that there is another category. There is another category of response that an author can give to a reviewer, and that is to just not give two hoots and just want to pick a fight with them. And I admit, those are so much fun that I'm amazed I forgot to include them as a category. And that happens in this issue. The writer is Jonathan Rhee from Oxford. And he writes, I'm just going to read it to you because it is beautifully done. I am grateful to John Gray. John Gray is a pop philosopher. I've reviewed a couple of his books, and he reviewed Jonathan Rhee's book in a previous issue. I'm grateful to John Gray for recognizing the inordinate ambition of my work, Witcraft, nothing less than to overthrow the joyless hegemony of traditional histories of philosophy. Hegel was one of the masters of the tradition, and he spelled out the assumptions behind it 200 years ago, that genuine philosophical inquiries transcend the idiosyncrasies of individual works and thinkers so as to take their place in an impersonal compendium of philosophical truth. It is the stuff of every mansplainer's dreams, flattering us with the prospect of surveying the entirety of human thought and dilating on it without end. If I am right, the same pretension to omniscience has inspired all subsequent histories of philosophy, even if their authors, Bertrand Russell, for example, would rather die in a ditch than be caught out in their fugitive Hegelianism. I don't know how well you're following the proper names here, but this author is having a blast, and so am I. Gray is horrified by my suggestion that we might treat philosophical works not as elements of a system, but as, quote, individual works of art. Imagine that. He warns me against reducing philosophy to, quote, a folly leading nowhere. Imagine that. He asked me to trust his judgment as to what has, quote, occupied philosophers since the late 5th century BC. And in parentheses, Rhee asks, all of them? And he assures me that the proper philosophers deal not in effete aesthetic indulgence, but in, quote, matter of fact and a muscular pursuit of truth. I appreciate his solicitude, but I put it to him that he has swallowed the Hegelian imposture hook, line, and sinker, and that he needs to think again. Does he really want to deny that truth can be at stake in the working of an art? So maybe I was wrong. Maybe there is one extra category for an author to respond to a critic in public, and I would be willing to bet the tea service that John Gray will write back. That will respond as well, because he's been called out as a dupe and also a mansplainer. But we shall see. If it happens, you'll be the first to know. But in the meantime, we have a bunch of packages here, and the first one is not from a publisher. I think I know what this first one is, because I think that the guilty party has already confessed to me. So let's see if I'm right. It's taped rather securely, but I don't have scissors nearby, or rather, I do have scissors nearby. I do have a pair of scissors right over there. But they're the scissors I usually use to trim the bean. And if I'm not going to grab them, she's right here. She's right next to me. I'm not going to grab them unnecessarily because I don't want to alarm her. She's not due for a trim for another week, so I'm not going to grab them. Instead, I will try to fight with this thing and get it open from main force. I'm thinking of you, baby bean. See? I'm thinking of you. Oh, I am. I'm thinking of you. I didn't want to bug you by getting your dreaded scissors. But I think I know what this is. because on my channel just recently, I did a video about a book that I mentioned that I was confused I did not have, and one of you acted accordingly. Let's see if I'm right. I am. Oh, goodness gracious. Oh, this is in perfect mint condition. Good Lord. It looks like the day it was made. This is The Making of Star Trek. This isn't quite the cover that I used, but this isn't quite the cover of the edition that I had when I photographed it with my fat basset hound 8-10 years ago. But here it is, in perfect condition. I don't know if you can tell, but this still has the sheen on the cover. When this can't, it has to have been 40 years since this was printed. This is the 26th printing in 1990. So this is 20 years old. Fantastic. Okay, well, thank you very much. I know I've already thanked the sender, but that's great. I now have a classic of Star Trek literature. But I think all the rest of these are just well behaved. I think they're all from publishers. So let's see what this first one is. I don't know why the bean is showing. She's showing attention when she doesn't ordinarily care about book packages anymore. I don't know why that is. Why are you showing attention? Huh? What's the matter? Huh? Who's the baby bean? Oh. Let's see here. So what have we got here? What's the first one? Okay. I know nothing about it. It's going to be... it's going to be a paperback original. Like that. I tried to show you the bean and everything turned to madness. It's going to be a paperback original. It's got a ton of literature going along with it. It seems hard to believe that I would need all that. This is a paperback original, a $16 paperback coming out on the 1st of June. And this is Barcelona Dreaming by Rupert Thompson. So anywhere in all of this information, do we have anything about the book? I don't want to read blurbs. Okay, yes, there is a bit about the book. What have we got here? Celebrated author Rupert Thompson, who has written Never Anyone But You and Catherine Carlyle, returns with a set of novel in stories set against the enchanting backdrop of Catalonia, Spain, in the years preceding the 2008 financial crisis. Reminiscent of James Salter's Dusk and Pasolini's Stories from the City of God, the trio of interlinked tales in this slim yet emotionally rich volume mine the deep recesses of human longing and reflect on the slippery nature of fate. Okay, and who is the celebrated author, Rupert Thompson? He is the author of 11 highly acclaimed novels, and one of which was selected by David Bowie as one of his 100 most must-read books of all time. He was shortlisted for the Costa Novel of the Year award, and his memoir, This Party's Got to Stop, was named Writers Guild Nonfiction of Book of the Year, and he lives in London. So this is going to be a bright yellow paperback original on the 1st of June, a novel in stories. Okay, so the made-up stories, fiction, and a little bit down the line, so I don't have to think about it right away. But it's coming right up. 1st of June is coming right up. What is this next one? Next one's a finished copy of something. Oh, fantastic. Oh, great. No publicity material here? No. Okay. I think this is out already. I think this was or if not out already, then out in a week or a day. This is a May release, I believe. This is Suchitra Vijayan's Midnight's Borders, a people's history of modern India. Disappointingly slim, but fantastic. Oh, great. There is our author, who was born and raised in Madras, and has worked has appeared in the Washington Post, GQ, Boston Review, The Hindu, and Foreign Policy. I have never written anything for The Hindu, and I would very much like to. I've heard nothing but good stories about writing for The Hindu. I would very much like to write reviews for them. I've tried a couple of times, but I don't think I have the right in. If you can change that, you let me know. But that has always been a goal. Keep in mind that has been a goal of mine for years now, without any. And I'm not one to sit on my goals, but I have had no progress in the 3 I's: Iowa, India, and Ireland. I have not printed a book review in one of those places. Iowa, yes, but 50 years ago. And India and Ireland, never. I would like to write book reviews on a regular basis for a print newspaper in Iowa, India, and Ireland. And it hasn't happened in any case. One of you actually years ago thought you might have a possibility of a small paper in Iowa. But nothing ever came of it, and I would still love to do that. Those of you who are in Iowa who might know maybe the editor or the proprietor of the local newspaper, my rates are very reasonable. My rates are, what is it that Sherlock Holmes says? My rates are fixed, except on those occasions when I waive them all together. That is entirely true. So what have we got here? Sharing borders with 6 countries and spanning a geography that extends from Pakistan to Myanmar, India is the world's largest democracy and second most populous country. It is also the site of the world's biggest crisis of statelessness, as it strips citizens from hundreds of thousands of its people, especially those living in disputed border regions. The author traveled India's vast land border to explore how these populations live and document how even places just a few miles apart can feel like entirely different countries. Fantastic. Oh, man. Okay, so I need to look this up and find out the publication date. But I have a feeling that this is a May release. We shall see. Let's see. What have we got here next? Oh, right. A book on Indian history. That is great. That is just great. All right. What is this next one? Another paperback, seems like. Maybe another... I'm still working out the ergonomics. The ergonomics would work perfectly if the beam weren't sleeping next to me. If she were up here, then I would have room for everything here, but she's decided to wedge herself against me. That's been true all day, actually. I mentioned, those of you, you get all the details on this channel. Yesterday, she approached my nose at the crack of dawn. In fact, the sun had not risen even above the ridge. It was just the light of the sun was in the air, but the sun had not crested the horizon yet, because she really wanted to go outside. She was making sure I knew that. She wasn't obnoxious about it, but she was making sure I knew that. And it was because she really had to go. Something evil had to emerge from her. And it did. But this morning was a completely different thing. She was back to normal. Her normal status is she hates the rough countryside. I try to make her like it, but she doesn't really. And she hates mornings. She is a city girl. She's very much a city girl, and she can't stand the morning. As far as she's concerned, the only logical approach to life is to loll around in bed until 11. And she did that this morning. First she was curled up close to me, and then when it started to get a little warmer, she laid just flat on right here on my shoulder. But she didn't want, it was a complete opposite of yesterday. She didn't have any urgency to go outside. But anyway, let's see what we have here. Oh my. Oh my. Okay. All right. This volume comes out in early June. It also is a paperback original, and some of you will know it. It is a reprint volume. This is Shadow and Claw by Gene Wolfe. This is the first 2 volumes in his Book of the New Sun tetralogy. So this has an introduction by Ada Palmer, and this volume has The Shadow of the Torturer and The Claw of the Conciliator. And here we have the original cover artwork for the Shadow of the Torturer. Wow. Okay, so Tor is coming out with, this is in their Tor Essentials line. They're bringing out the whole of the Book of the New Sun, 2 volumes. And this one comes out in early June, and the next one, Sword and Citadel, comes out in early August. So I suppose I should read a little of this to you, those of you who maybe aren't familiar with this. Gene Wolfe's Nebula award-winning tetralogy, The Book of the New Sun, returns in 2 all-new trade paperback editions and the paper overboard exclusive editions, perfect for collectors, fans, and those new to Gene Wolfe's masterpieces of science fiction and fantasy. Let's see here. Both of these classics works will be making their first trade hardcover appearance in almost 40 years. Oh, so there is a hardcover option here. Paper overboard. I guess that's what that means. There is a hardcover option here. That's not what Tor sent me, but collectors can get a hardcover. I haven't seen a hardcover of Shadow of the Torturer in so long. At the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston, you see everything. But I want to ask Mark Richardson, wasn't Shadow of the Torture or maybe all of the New Sun books, weren't they science fiction book club editions at one point? Well, anyway, let's see here. The books will include 2 introductions by critically acclaimed historian and science fiction writer Arda Palmer for each omnibus in an ode to Woolf's long-standing career and influence in science fiction and fantasy. Incredible. Okay. Okay. This has blurbs from the time, so decades ago, and a short biography of Gene Woolf, and this has an introduction. Incredible. Okay, the reason that those of you who have never heard of this, don't know what I'm talking about, don't know what this is, the reason that I seem a little bit wistful is, or even struck for words, is I've had some wonderful conversations with this author, and also the Book of the New Sun is great stuff. It is operating on the borderline between fantasy and science fiction, and it is one of the greatest productions of the genre of SFF. I don't know of many longtime science fiction fantasy fans who wouldn't rank this in the top 20. I know plenty that would rank it in the top 10. It is absolutely beautiful and intelligent work. The idea that it's getting a whole new reprint, and that there's also that collector's item, that is great. That's fantastic. I know there are people who will like that. But the fact that these trade paperbacks are going to be in bookstores is great. I've often complained on this channel that science fiction is one of the genres that eats its own progenitors. So that romance is another one, but science fiction is really bad. So that if you're a newcomer to the genre and you know that you sort of like it, and you get maybe the sense from Brent Weeks or Brandon Sanderson, who have never been seen in the same room together, I might add. If you might read some of their works and get the sense that, yeah, I like this, but I get the feeling that there might be better stuff out there. If you walk down the aisle of your Barnes & Noble science fiction and fantasy section, you will not see an accurate sampling in the slightest of the great stuff that's out there. Look at how many great science fiction and fantasy books we've talked about on this channel that are out of print, and have been for decades. So it is always a really encouraging thing to know that a genuinely great work of the genre is going to be back in bookstores where it can find new readers. That is wonderful. That is fantastic. And then we'll do the box and we'll be done, although it's all downhill from there, really. Is. Unless this is a hardcover reprint of something that I love, I doubt very much that... what have we got here? Okay, that's an invoice. We don't need that. Oh, great. Okay, this is a finished copy from Princeton University Press. We've seen the advanced copy of this before, but just in case you weren't around for it, we'll do. This is by Tonio Andrade, and this is The Last Embassy: The Dutch Mission of 1795 and the Forgotten History of Western Encounters with China. And you'll notice that despite that historical subject and despite the huge subtitle, the book designer here decided not to go with a faded, out-of-focus, sepia tone photograph. Instead, this is a very evocative cover. Great. Fantastic. Let's see more of it. Now, I got an invoice for this, but I didn't get a pub sheet, so we'll just read it from the dust jacket here. George Macartney's disastrous 1793 mission to China plays a central role in the prevailing narrative of modern Sino-European relations. Summarily dismissed by the Qing court, Macartney failed... Is that Qing or is it King? I don't know. Or maybe Xing. I don't know one way or another. It's Q-I-N-G, not Q-U. Q-I-N-G. Macartney failed in nearly all of his objectives, perhaps setting the stage for the opium wars of the 19th century and the mistrust that still marks relationship today. But not all European encounters with China were disastrous. The Last Embassy tells the story of the Dutch mission of 1795, bringing to light a dramatic but little-known episode that transforms our understanding of the history of China and the West. And that is fantastic, because that means that this author found a small thing in history that this author believes is worth more attention. Authors in that situation not only have to do a ton of original research, they also have to convince you. And that often puts historians on their best footing. You'll never find a historian worse than someone who is writing a 600-page work on a subject that they are assuming, you are assuming, is worth your complete and undivided attention. You'll never find an author of any kind that is more lazy and prone to corpulence than that. It's this kind of thing where the historian knows they're making a case for something that you've either not heard of or have judged in one way that they want you to judge in another. That usually brings out the best in the discipline. Drawing on a wealth of archival material, the author paints a panoramic and multifaceted portrait of an age marked by intrigues and war. China was on the brink of rebellion. In Europe, French armies were invading Holland. Enduring a harrowing voyage, the Dutch mission was to be the last European diplomatic delegation ever received in the traditional Chinese court. The author shows how, in contrast to the British emissaries, the Dutch were men with deep knowledge of Asia, who respected regional diplomatic norms and were committed to understanding China on its own terms. Okay, fantastic. Now I want to know who Professor Andrade is. Who is he? All right, he's very young. That's great. That's also a great photo. You know, it's not him looking like he's just down from Mount Sinai. It's just a pretty photo of a friendly guy. Let's see who he is here when he's at home. He's a professor of Chinese and global history at Emory University. He's written a large number of books about China and the West. Okay, fantastic. So he knows what he's talking about. Great. And he lives in Decatur, Georgia. Tonio Andrade lives in Decatur, Georgia. And that is a perfect segue for Steve to remind you all that Steve is the newest book section editor in the country for a print newspaper, a full-color print newspaper, and that full-color print newspaper, it's mighty tiny, but it is in northern Georgia. Big Canoe News in northern Georgia has a new book section editor, and that is me. 2 full pages and a spread at the back of the news section of every monthly issue. $30 a year will get you a monthly issue every month for a year, and that books coverage is not local book coverage. It's not just Georgia and Georgia related. A lot of small newspaper book sections decide to go that way. That is a legitimate decision that a book section editor can make. Mainly because it's local interest, but also partially for practical reasons. A lot of times those local editors simply don't have the network of readers that they can, so that they can generate reviews of mainstream new releases like this one. And I've made it the opposite decision with Big Canoe News. Under my tenure, it will be a real book section. It will be broad-based and covering new releases with the occasional column from me and another columnist. So well worth your time. The smallest print newspaper in the country, circulation-wise, is very pretty and has a new and very vigorous book section full of original coverage. Now, that coverage is all free online. Big Canoe News does not paywall anything. But if you wanted to support the paper and get it delivered to your doorstep, you can always subscribe. So the information is down below. But anyway, it's always nice to see a book from one of my potential constituents. So anyway, that's the mail. So we have The Last Embassy. We have, this is just so thrilling. We have Shadow and Claw by the great Gene Wolfe. We have Midnight's Borders about, A People's History of Modern India. We have Barcelona Dreaming, a novel in stories, in a paperback original. And finally, we have The Making of Star Trek in this lovely, lovely paperback edition. But keep in mind, just as a pointless reminder, it's a pointless reminder because A, you already know it, and B, you're also incredibly generous that it's not going to affect your behavior at all. But nevertheless, keep in mind, when I make a Library Tour of Doom episode, for instance, in which I mention that I don't any longer possess a copy of a book and really wish I did, it's a note to myself, not instructions to you. I'm saying to myself that the Brattle Bookshop here in Boston will provide, that I will keep an eye out for that book, and when it appears, I will grab a copy. Not for you to go and get me a copy. It's much appreciated, though. But anyway, that is the mail for today, and I'm going to wrap this up, but I will see you soon. Thank you, BookTube.